Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. Captain Van Cleef, you are to intercept and assess. Hold position until further notice. Admiral Ewan Addy's voice came through the priority channel, firm and commanding. Understood, Van Cleef responded, his fingers tightening around the command console. His fleet had already taken formation, a wall of warships stretching across the void, blocking any approach toward the inner system. The ferryman, his command cruiser, had just completed a full sensor sweep, confirming what instinct had already screamed. Something wasn't right. The unidentified fleet wasn't broadcasting any known identification codes, yet it hadn't entered human space recklessly. It moved with discipline, with calm, precise formation, its massive ships clustered in tight ranks. Van Cleef exchanged a glance with his bridge crew. This was no lost convoy, no desperate refugees. Confirmed. Holding position at Oort Cloud's edge, he reported. A fleet-wide alert pulsed across the HUDs of every human vessel, locking all weapons to stand by. The outer defense perimeter of the system was at full readiness. They're still advancing. No course change. No attempt to alter formation, Lieutenant Lino Sivs noted, his tone even, but edged with caution. Aboard the Kestrel, his frigate maintained overwatch, its long-range targeting systems sweeping for any sudden shifts. This stinks, Enrique, Lieutenant J. Williams muttered from the Bastonia, his tactical overlay blinking with incomplete readouts. The Bastonia flanked the right sector of the blockade, positioned for quick response. They're baiting us. This is a setup. Van Cleef exhaled sharply. His gut told him the same thing. We hold. No one fires unless fired upon. Open a channel, he ordered. But before his comm officer could even begin the transmission, the alien fleet made contact first. Static cracked over the bridge before settling into a layered, almost discordant vibration, each syllable resonating like a clash of metal and shifting stone. The alien dialect carried an eerie, oscillating timbre, as if spoken through overlapping frequencies. The translation AI parsed through the interference, reconstructing the phonetics into something understandable. A deep, steady voice emerged. This is High Leader Kaligad of the Dakfadat. The voice carried a slow, deliberate weight. We come seeking assistance. Our fleet has suffered great loss. We request safe passage. Silence stretched over the comms. Van Cleef's fingers hovered over the control interface. He exchanged a glance with his bridge officers, their faces tight with unspoken skepticism. Dakfadat fleet, you are entering a protected sector of human space. You will halt all forward motion immediately. The alien's reply was smooth, almost amused. We cannot stop. There are circumstances beyond our control. We require urgent aid. Van Cleef's eyes narrowed. Then explain. What happened to your fleet? Why are you moving in a combat formation? A pause. Kaligad's response came slower. Too slow. There are elements at play. We cannot delay. Time is not on our side. Williams scoffed through the private channel. He's stalling. They're stalling. They need time for something. Van Cleef clenched his fist. Maintain defensive posture. Weapons primed. Any sudden movement, we react. And then the alarm screamed. The ferryman tactical display erupted with new contact pings. Van Cleef's stomach clenched as the numbers spiked faster than his mind could process. The dark void beyond their viewports twisted as massive shapes unfurled from between the Dakfadat capital ships. 100, 200, more, almost 1,000. No, that's not. Siv's voice cut off, his disbelief choking the words before they fully formed. Williams let out a sharp breath. They were there the whole damn time. Sleek, predatory attack craft poured out, their dark hulls nearly invisible against the backdrop of the fleet. They had been hiding, hundreds of smaller warships nestled in the gravitational shadows of their behemoth cruisers. The trap was complete, and Kaligad's voice returned, smooth, satisfied. Well, I know what you have. and I want your planet." Hell broke loose. Plasma fire ripped through the void. The first human vessels exploded instantly, caught in the sudden onslaught. Shockwaves tore across the fleet. Van Cleef gritted his teeth. "Break formation! Return fire! Get the hell out of that kill zone!" The Kestrel dove hard to port, narrowly avoiding a spiraling explosion as another frigate was torn apart. Sive's voice came through, his tone clipped. "They had this planned. We're already surrounded." The Bastogne carved through the chaos, pulse cannons hammering the nearest attack craft. "Not for long. We punch through their weak spots, get the hell out, and take what we learned with us." Van Cleef's ship rolled hard as a burst of plasma grazed its hull, searing through outer layers of armor. "We can't win this fight. Prioritize escape. Relay all battle data to High Command, now." The Dak Fadat tore through them mercilessly. Their smaller ships were faster, darting between human formations, exploiting every weakness. On the Bastogne, William's voice came through the comms, strained but determined. "I'll cover you. Just get out of here, Enrique." Van Cleef's gut twisted. "That's an order, Jay. You stay with the group." But the Bastogne was already veering into the heaviest cluster of enemy ships. Its railguns roared, tearing through the flanks of two Dak Fadat cruisers, but there were too many. The human vessel buckled under the sheer weight of firepower. William's final words crackled through the comm. "See you on the other side, brother." The Bastogne vanished in a white-hot explosion. Van Cleef's breath hitched, but there was no time, no space for grief. He forced it down, locking his focus on the only thing that mattered now: survival. "All units, fall back. Civs, where are you?" The Kestrel was hit. Static choked Civs's transmission. His face flickered on Van Cleef's console. Blood streaked his temple, but he was still breathing. "Still with you, Cap. Ship's compromised. Jump drives, offline." A Dak Fadat warship zeroed in on him. Van Cleef's fingers curled into a fist. "Get your escape pods ready, I'll—" A flash of light. Civs was gone. The Kestrel detonated, its wreckage scattering across the void. Van Cleef's knuckles turned white. His ferryman was barely holding together, its systems screaming warnings of imminent failure. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered, except making sure they paid for this. He forced the remaining ships into a coordinated retreat, dodging and weaving through the wreckage of their fallen fleet. Plasma fire scorched past, debris fields shredded hulls, but the Dak Fadat weren't chasing them. That stopped Van Cleef cold. They were letting them go. Not out of mercy, not out of restraint, because they thought it was already over. For them, it was a game. For humanity, it was the first move in a war they'd live to regret. The ferryman was dying. Its frame shuddered, metal groaning under the strain as Van Cleef fought to keep it steady, weaving through the wreckage of his fallen fleet. Fire and ruin filled the void. Twisted hulls, drifting corpses, the remnants of ships that had once stood beside him. A streak of plasma lit up his viewport, too close. His grip tightened on the console, blood slick between his fingers. It wasn't his. It didn't matter. All that mattered was surviving, and making them pay. "Lunar Command, this is Van Cleef. Transmitting priority data to High Command. Secure the link now." "Connection established, sir," Lieutenant Rains confirmed, his voice strained but steady. The command deck flickered in emergency red, alarms blaring around them. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the ship simply gave out. Van Cleef barely heard him. His focus remained on the transmission, watching as the critical data surged through the failing systems of the ferryman, relaying directly to Admiral Addy's command station on the moon. "Admiral Addy, do you read?" Static crackled for a moment before the reply came through. "Reading you, Van Cleef. We have the data. Get to safety." Van Cleef exhaled sharply. Mission accomplished. Only then did he shift his attention back to the dying ship around him. "Approaching the station, Captain." "Hull integrity at 17%, Rains reported. Van Cleef's jaw tightened. "All hands, prepare for docking. Abandon ship the second we're in." The outer sentinel loomed ahead, a silent fortress, its defenses already shifting to cover their retreat. As soon as the ferryman cleared the docking barrier, the magnetic clamps locked on, pulling the battered ship into the bay. Flames still licked its outer hull as hatches burst open, crew scrambling out. Van Cleef hit the release on his harness and staggered forward. His legs nearly gave out, but two officers caught him before he collapsed. "Tell me the Admiral has everything he needs." One of the technicians checked the interface, nodding. "Data confirmed, sir. Transmission is solid." Van Cleef straightened his shoulders, pushing himself upright. "Good. Now get me a damn ship." Warlord Caligad stood at the center of his tactical chamber, watching the scattered remains of the human fleet drift into the abyss. The battle was over. Behind him, Zaradar, his intel officer, approached with cautious steps, his posture rigid, mandibles twitching in restrained impatience. "The survivors will regroup. Their defenses may still—" Caligad turned sharply, eyes locking onto his second-in-command. "They ran, Zaradar." His voice was smooth, edged with cold irritation. "They fled with what little they had left. There is no counterattack coming." A low vibration rippled through the chamber as the fleet's engines surged, pushing them beyond the final edge of the Oort cloud. The solar system lay ahead. Zaradar shifted, but did not argue. His golden irises flicked to the hollow display, where the blue sphere of Earth flickered in the void, still distant. There were no large fleets awaiting them, no visible fortifications. "They are exposed." Caligad bared his serrated teeth in a slow, deliberate grin. "Yes?" The Dakfadat Armada continued its advance, passing Pluto's orbit, moving deeper into human space. There was no response. The remnants of the human forces had not returned to fight. They had already lost. Zaradar observed the readings, antennae twitching slightly as his talons worked the console. Still no military response. Their homeworld remains unguarded. Caligad growled, satisfied. "We end this within the cycle." The launch bay was already alive with activity by the time Van Cleef arrived. Technicians rushed between strike fighters, prepping weapons, loading fuel cells. He barely heard them over the pulsing ache in his skull. One of the deck officers turned as he approached. "Sir, we just got this one calibrated. Small, but she'll punch hard." Van Cleef barely nodded. The craft before him was sleek, stripped for speed and combat. Barely enough room for a pilot and its weapon systems. "She'll do." He climbed into the cockpit, strapping himself in. The startup sequence hummed through his bones as the AI interfaced with the station's battle network. The feed lit up instantly. Enemy fleet detected. Inbound trajectory straight to Earth. A soft chime echoed through the cockpit. Incoming transmission. Van Cleef exhaled sharply and accepted the call. "Captain," came Admiral Addy's voice, calm but firm. "I've received your report. I need to know, how did they hide that many warships? How did our sensors miss this?" Van Cleef's grip tightened around the controls. "It's their hull composition. The material masks smaller ships when clustered with larger ones. Our scans read them as singular masses instead of individual vessels." A pause. "I'll talk with the chief engineer." "That won't happen again," Addy said. "Get to your formation. We'll be ready." The transmission cut. Van Cleef tilted his head from side to side, loosening the tension as he worked the controls. "They're not stopping," he muttered. His heart pounded as the bay doors hissed open, revealing the void beyond. "But neither are we." The thrusters roared to life, and the darkness swallowed him whole. On the central command deck of Lunar Command, Admiral Addy stood with his arms folded behind his back, watching the approaching fleet through the reinforced viewport. The holograms before him flickered with fleet positions, trajectory models, and predictive combat data gathered from Van Cleef's transmission. His officers moved like clockwork, relaying orders with precision. "Confirm Oort line readiness." Lieutenant Voss's voice cut through the controlled chaos. "All systems green, sir. The field is active." Addy's lips pressed into a thin line. "Let them come." The enemy pushed past Pluto's orbit, advancing deeper into the system. The Dakfadat fleet moved in flawless formation, their warships cutting through the black without hesitation. They did not stop. They did not question. They had no idea. And as the first wave of electromagnetic interference hit, their formation fractured. The Dakfadat fleet emerged from the Oort cloud, its massive warships cutting through the drifting expanse of icy debris like silent monoliths. High Leader Kali Gad watched from his command chamber, standing tall before the massive holo display that projected the battlefield ahead. The solar system stretched before them, each orbit a stepping stone toward Earth. The final conquest, the culmination of Dakfadat supremacy. Zaradar shifted beside him, scanning the tactical readouts. "We are clear of the cloud. All systems normal. No resistance detected." Kaligad exhaled slowly. "They have nothing left." His warriors surrounded him in the dimly lit chamber, their elongated forms draped in reinforced combat exoskeletons. Their glowing ocular lenses reflected the warpath ahead, a clear, unchallenged advance toward the core of the human domain. And then, the void trembled. A wave rippled through the fleet, so subtle that the technicians hesitated, unsure if their instruments were malfunctioning. Kaligad turned as one of them flinched, eyes wide as sensor readouts flickered and glitched. A low hum built in the walls of the ship. Then a sharp static pulse erupted through every open frequency. "High Leader, our long-range sensors just went dark." Another officer whirled around in alarm. "Tactical scanners are being scrambled. The interference is coming from nowhere," Zaradar finished, his mandibles clicking. Kaligad's fingers tightened around the rail before him. "What are they doing?" Before the answer could come, ships began to disappear from the display, one by one, and not because of the interference, because they were dying. From the drifting graveyard of the Oort cloud, the hunters emerged. Small, fast-moving human strike craft peeled away from the asteroid fields, maneuvering with impossible precision between the ice formations and orbital debris. They had been waiting. One squadron, with the call sign Spectre 9, ignited its thrusters in absolute silence, coming up behind a Dakfadat scout vessel. Target locked. A railgun fired. The slug punched straight through the alien ship's propulsion core, splitting it in two. No explosion, no alarms, just cold, mechanical destruction. The ship's remains drifted, unnoticed, before another was hit, then another. Across the cloud, the same thing played out. Isolated warships were picked apart one by one. Each kill was methodical, ruthless. No grand firefights, no wasted movements, only precision, execution. And then, the real chaos began. The command deck flickered with emergency signals. Kaligad's claws dug into the console. "Report!" Zaradar was already moving. "We are losing ships, but we don't know to what." That was the problem. Not just that they were being attacked, not just that they couldn't see it happening. They couldn't stop it. Officers across the fleet shouted conflicting reports, voices tense, almost frantic. "Enemies on our flank. Negative. I see nothing. We're taking fire, but our sensors show clear space." Van Cleef's fighter cockpit rumbled as he broke formation, leading his squadron through the drifting battlefield. His targeting HUD was lit with enemy contacts, but they were blinded. "They still think they're in control," came the voice of Commander George Gatt through the comms. Van Cleef's lips curled. "Then let's remind them who's hunting who." His missiles tore through a Dakfadat gunship that had begun pivoting for a counterattack. The hull cracked, venting atmosphere, bodies of enemy warriors spilling into the black. Van Cleef spun his ship hard, dodging a stray blast from another enemy fighter. He snapped off 2 more shots, tearing through the ship's weapons array before it had a chance to fire again. The battlefield was shifting. The humans weren't fighting them head-on. They were strangling them. Kaligad's mandibles clenched as he took in the shifting battlefield. Every attempt to reorganize their ships was met with more disruptions. Comms cut in and out. Ships that tried to rally were ambushed and torn apart. And now, something new. Explosions rippling through their formation. Mines. The humans had seeded the debris fields with ordnance. His fleet wasn't just being attacked, it was being dismantled. Zaradar turned to him, his posture tense. "High Leader, our fleet cohesion is breaking down." Kaligad's mandibles twitched, his talons drumming against the console. "Ridiculous. These are isolated strikes. Humans don't have the capability to coordinate an attack of this scale." More warning signals pulsed across the holo display. More ships gone. His voice was sharper now. "Verify. Find the attackers. Then—" A fresh explosion cut him off, a formation torn apart. Dakfadat warships veered off course, their formations crumbling under the relentless ambush. Engines sputtered, fire and debris tearing through the void as shattered hulls drifted lifeless in the black. Kaligad's mandibles clenched, his talons curling into a fist. His war fleet had never struggled like this, never. "Enough," he hissed, his voice a low growl, vibrating through the command chamber. Zaradar turned to him, his golden irises narrowing. "High Leader," Kaligad's eyes flicked to the central holo display. The humans had emerged from the darkness undetected, struck without warning, then scattered, re-engaging at unpredictable angles, leaving only wreckage in their wake. Their pathetic scatter tactics should not have worked, and yet they had. "They fight like vermin, but no more. We cleanse them from this system now." His talons tapped against the command panel, activating a restricted subroutine. The chamber lights dimmed, casting eerie shadows across the black-crimson holo display. A circular glyph expanded outward, revealing his most devastating weapon. Zaradar took a step forward, his exoskeletal frame tensing. Even he had never seen it deployed in full power. The Eye of Nyalat hovered at the heart of the fleet, a behemoth construct of alien metallurgy and pulsing conduits. Its vast, jagged spires crackled with an unnatural glow, exuding waves of energy that made the air hum with static interference. A test was necessary. Kaligad motioned to one of his officers. "Find me a target." A silent moment. Then a Dakfadat gunner gestured toward the viewport. A sector of the asteroid field shows unusual energy distortions, possible debris, or a hidden human presence. "Perfect." Kaligad's mandibles clicked once. "Fire a calibration shot." The chamber dimmed as the eye's primary conduit flared, a vortex of blue-white energy spiraling toward the derelict human craft. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then, the asteroid fragments within the blast radius shuddered violently, their surfaces fracturing outward in jagged patterns, breaking apart as if collapsing inward on themselves. The material didn't melt, didn't explode, just crumbled, layer by layer, as if consumed by an unseen force. Silence followed. The targeted debris hadn't just been destroyed, it had been erased. Zaradar's mandibles clicked involuntarily. He had witnessed plasma bombardments, kinetic rail barrages, planetary incinerations, but never anything like this. Kaligad's voice was steady, certain. "Target that small blue planet." Zaradar hesitated. "That would obliterate their first fallback position, cut off their escape route. If there is a station or stronghold there, it will be erased. And if the humans are hiding," his mandibles twitched in a smirk, "they will be erased with it." Zaradar nodded and relayed the command. Across the fleet, power conduits realigned, the eye's core expanding outward, its pulse of energy growing stronger, distorting the very light around it. The human resistance had been an inconvenience, but now they would be wiped away. "Van Cleef, we have movement." The transmission crackled over his comms, Commander George Gatt's voice cutting through the interference. Van Cleef's HUD flashed a priority alert. Unknown energy signature detected. The power buildup was massive, dwarfing anything he had ever seen in combat. His ship's sensors struggled to stabilize the readings, but one thing was clear. Something big was coming. His ship jerked as a wave of force rippled through space, the residual energy sending shock tremors through his hull. Van Cleef gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain control as his instruments flickered. momentarily scrambled by the surge. Then, through the wreckage, he saw it. A colossal construct at the fleet's core, its pulsing conduits radiating with unstable power. But that wasn't what made his stomach drop. Beyond it, where once there had been a cluster of debris, twisted hull fragments, asteroid formations, and what could have been an abandoned outpost, there was nothing. Not vaporized, not shattered. Gone. The very matter had collapsed inward, folding into itself, crushed by an unseen force. His scanner AI scrambled to compensate, struggling to process the energy fluctuations. Readings spiked off the charts, unstable, oscillating, unlike anything in the known database. The laws of physics didn't apply there anymore. His breath was tight in his chest. "That's no fleet cannon," he muttered. "What the hell are they charging?" He snapped open a direct channel to Admiral Addy. "Admiral, we have a problem." A moment of silence. Then Addy's voice, calm but firm. "Report." Van Cleef's fingers moved rapidly over the console, transmitting the sensor readings and energy output analysis. "They're charging something massive. Whatever this is, if it fires, we're done." There was no pause this time. Admiral Addy's voice came through, sharp but controlled. "That explains what we were missing. We've been running your data. I'm sending you what we have. This is how you stop it." Van Cleef's HUD updated as his AI processed the incoming data, locking onto the superweapon's primary stabilization nodes. "Got it. Captain, take it down." Van Cleef exhaled sharply. "Copy that." Then he cut the channel, turned his ship toward the target, and accelerated. His squadron followed as he broke formation, pushing into the enemy fleet's core. "Watch the flak fire!" Explosions erupted around them as Dak Fadat gunners scrambled to respond. The attack was too sudden, too fast. Van Cleef's eyes locked onto the energy stabilizers at the eye's base. "We hit those nodes. We kill the charge-up sequence." His wingmen responded instantly. "Confirmed. Targeting primary conduits." Railguns lit up the darkness, searing through the vacuum, striking true. A chain reaction erupted, electrical surges cascading along the eye's framework. On the Dak Fadat flagship, Kaligad's mandibles pulled back in a snarl as the holodisplay glitched. What was that? Zaradar's hands flew over the consoles. "The humans! They hit the stabilization network! Get it back online! Fire!" But the weapon refused to respond. It had been destabilized mid-charge, its energy circuits disrupted. The entropy pulse, instead of firing forward, collapsed inward, dissipating into a chaotic void distortion before vanishing completely. The enemy's weapon had failed. Now, it was humanity's turn to strike. "Light 'em up!" Van Cleef's squadron unleashed hell, now deep within the enemy fleet. Explosions rippled through the Dak Fadat lines, battleships breaking apart, energy cores rupturing. "They're losing cohesion," Gat's voice cut through the comms. Van Cleef looped around, targeting another warship. Pain flared along his ribs with the sudden motion, the deep bruise from the ferryman's crash tightening like a vice. He gritted his teeth. No time for that now. "Keep hitting their engines. Don't let them regroup." The humans pressed the advantage, their fleet now moving as one, exploiting the chaos. For the first time since the battle began, the Dak Fadat were breaking. The command deck was in shambles. Tactical officers scrambled to regain control, but the fleet was collapsing. Zaradar's voice was grim. "We've lost 20 warships in the last 6 minutes. Kaligad's talons trembled, his fury barely contained. "Get the weapon online." Zaradar didn't move. "High Leader, it won't reactivate. The disruption caused a power cycle failure. We need time." Kaligad slammed his fist into the console, cracking the surface. "Then buy it. Reinforce the front lines. If they think they have won..." Another explosion tore through the fleet, and Kaligad felt it, for the first time. In his command chamber, Kaligad's golden eyes flicked over the holodisplay, tracking the enemy's movement patterns. The humans had struck from the shadows, avoiding direct engagements. But now they were moving, no longer ghosts in the dark. His outer flanks reported ongoing skirmishes, pursuit engagements, ambushes that turned into running battles. They weren't just striking anymore. Zaradar, standing at his side, spoke without turning. "High Leader, the humans are no longer ghosts in the dark. They strike openly now, engaging at every flank. If they mean to run, they're doing it with guns blazing." Kaligad's mandibles flared, his patience gone. "Then we burn them from the stars. I want full fleet convergence. Crush them before they retreat beyond reach." The battle raged, a relentless storm of fire and destruction, both fleets maneuvering as they fought, pushing deeper into the system. The conflict was no longer scattered, it was surging forward. As the Dakfadat forces pressed ahead, so did the humans, weaving through debris fields, using every inch of space to their advantage. And with every kill, every explosion, they inched closer to Uranus. Then the holo display flickered. The Eye of Nihilat was back online. Kaligad's mandibles twitched. "This ends now." Van Cleef's hands were steady as he adjusted his flight vector, weaving through the asteroid-laden currents near Uranus. His squadron hadn't stopped moving since the first strike, and neither had the enemy. They were still in pursuit, driving the battle deeper into the system. A chime echoed in his headset. George Gatt's voice cut in. "New energy spike, same signature." Van Cleef's HUD flared red. The superweapon was charging again. He punched the comms. "Admiral, we have a lock on their next target. It's the Triton station." Addy's response came instantly. "Confirmed. It's time to engage again." Van Cleef's engines roared, his squadron already angling toward the enemy's core. "Weapons hot. Follow my lead." Aboard the Dakfadat flagship, Kaligad watched as the targeting array locked onto the massive human station. Triton Station. The structure orbited Uranus, its reinforced titanium lattice shimmering against the gas giant's pale glow. He let out a slow breath. Fire. The Eye of Nihilat's conduit surged, power cascading through its massive frame. Then, space itself split open. Kaligad's sensors flared too late. The humans had risked everything, dropping out of FTL at suicidal velocity, straight into striking range. His mandibles twitched in shock. "Stop them! Intercept! Now!" But the squadron was already firing Van Cleef's fighters. The first barrage of high-velocity slugs tore into the Eye's core infrastructure, sending arcs of energy spiraling wildly. A second salvo cracked the control housing, then a targeted missile burst struck the primary regulator. The weapon's charge stuttered. "No!" Kaligad roared. But the damage was done. Instead of the deadly, controlled pulse meant to annihilate the station, the weapon shuddered, its energy buildup spiking erratically, then collapsing in on itself. The shot dissolved into raw, chaotic radiation, scattering into the depths of space. Another failure. Kaligad's talons tightened against the railing. He knew what was coming next. Van Cleef barely had time to breathe before the return fire came. "Incoming! Evasive now!" The Dakfadat response was immediate and overwhelming. A coordinated barrage of energy lances ripped through the darkness. His fighter shuddered violently, his shields straining as he barely narrowed his escape vector. Gatt's voice came through, strained. "They were ready for this one." "Keep moving," Van Cleef barked. The squadron twisted, ducking through enemy flak fire, using the debris fields for cover. One pilot wasn't fast enough. A Dakfadat pulse cannon sheared through his fuselage, igniting his ship in a brief, brilliant flare before it was lost to the void. "We're losing space!" Van Cleef gritted his teeth. They had done what they came for, but if they didn't pull out now, they weren't getting out at all. "Break off! Full retreat pattern!" His fighters' thrusters ignited, banking hard, twisting between the fragmented hulls of destroyed Dakfadat ships. Gatt followed, his ship scraping so close to a drifting warship that sparks trailed across his viewport. The squadron fled into the blackness, pursued, but intact. They had survived, and the enemy had failed, again. On the flagship, chaos. Kaligad stood motionless, watching the hollow projections ripple and distort. He had been certain that his people would crush these humans, certain that they would sweep through this system without resistance. But now, his superweapon had failed twice. His fleet was losing cohesion, and his comms. "High Leader, we have..." The transmission cut. Another fleet gone. Another portion of his forces cut off. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning. The Dak Fadat fleet shifted course, engines flaring to full burn, their formation realigning for a direct charge. Kaligad's patience had run dry. "Enough, all ships, break for the core system." The command pulsed through the fleet, and his warlords moved without hesitation. No more cautious advances, no more probing attacks. Earth was still beyond their reach, but they would not stop until it was within range. Ignore their distractions. Fire only when necessary. Keep formation tight. The fleet surged forward, breaking past the contested zones, cutting straight toward their final target. As if sensing the shift, the human fleet re-emerged, not to harass, but to block their advance. Plasma fire filled the void, streaking between colliding warships. Explosions tore across the battlefield. Kaligad ignored the skirmishes. The humans couldn't stop them forever. They only needed to reach optimal range. Then the Eye of Nihilat would finish what this war had started. His mandibles clicked as he turned toward the superweapon, its vast structure looming at the fleet's core, pulsing with restrained energy. Reassign warships, defensive perimeter around the eye. Keep it intact until we reach firing distance. His talons tapped against the command panel, narrowing his gaze at the battlefield. Advance at full speed. Get us into firing range. I will oversee the charge personally. This time, nothing would stop them. "Admiral, we have a problem." Van Cleef's fighter rattled as he pulled into formation. Through his cracked viewport, he saw the Dak Fadat fleet breaking from engagement, no longer holding defensive lines, no longer reacting to human attacks. They had changed course. His sensors flared red as his HUD updated, processing the fleet's movements. Trajectory projection, Earth. A chime echoed in his comms. "Confirmed, Captain." Addie's voice came through, calm as ever. "They're making their final push." Van Cleef glanced at his squadron. Their forces were stretched thin, their ships battered. Every pilot in his unit knew what this meant. He exhaled. "Understood. Your objective remains the same. Hold the line, at any cost." Van Cleef's jaw clenched. I'm tired of this shit, sir. We lost too many today. This ends now, I swear." Then he cut the channel and pushed his throttle forward. Now there was no turning back. The first detonation rocked the lower structure. Kaligad's head snapped up. "What?" Another impact. Then another. His display flashed with enemy markers. But this time, there were too many. Human strike craft had pierced their formation, heading straight for the weapon's core stabilizers. But unlike before, they weren't evading. They weren't trying to survive. They were forcing their way through. The Dak Fadat defenses erupted in response, interceptors swarming, plasma turrets cutting through the void like 1,000 burning blades. The first wave of human fighters didn't even make it halfway. One by one, their ships burst apart under the sheer weight of firepower. A pilot screamed through comms before his ship detonated in a spiraling trail of wreckage. Another twisted violently before vanishing in a streak of plasma. The squadron was being shredded, but they kept coming. Kaligad's mandibles pulled back in a silent snarl. "They're throwing themselves into the fire." Another fighter broke apart. Another pilot was lost. Still, the remaining humans pushed forward, weaving between the Dak Fadat warships, their numbers thinning with every second. "Weapons free! Target their stabilizers!" Van Cleef's squadron dove into the firestorm, dodging between towering warships as defensive turrets screamed past them. He saw the eye ahead, its massive energy core swirling, distorting the very fabric of space. If it fires, Earth is gone. "Gat, we need to cut through their defenses." "Already on it." Gat's wing peeled off, strafing enemy interceptors, clearing a path for Van Cleef's final run. A railgun blast clipped his wing, alarms blaring as his fighter groaned in protest. But he kept going. He had to. His HUD locked onto one final target, the main cannon itself. "I'm going for it. Cover me." "Van Cleef, wait." Too late. He was already moving. Caligad's attention snapped to his tactical display, a lone contact breaching their defense grid. His mandibles twitched as he turned toward the viewport. A single human fighter burned through the firestorm faster than the others, engines bright like a comet, heading straight for the core of the weapon. His talons dug into the railing. "Destroy him! Now!" The fleet's guns pivoted, but it was too late. Van Cleef's fighter surged forward, its weapon systems locked onto the Eye's primary cannon. A final burst of railfire, a single perfect shot, direct hit. The weapon's core cracked. Then, boom! A shockwave ripped through the Dakfadat formation, tearing through warships and distorting the very fabric of space as the Eye of Nihilat collapsed into itself, consuming everything nearby in a blinding cascade of energy. For a moment, there was nothing but pure, searing light. Then it was gone. Silence fell over the battlefield. Total. Absolute. For the first time since the invasion began, nothing moved. On the bridge of Lunar Command, Admiral Addy stood frozen, his fingers gripping the console. His voice came through the comms, low but firm. "Van Cleef, report." Static. George Gatt's voice followed, rough with tension. "Van Cleef, do you read?" More silence. Someone adjusted the sensor arrays. A tech officer spoke hesitantly. "Sir, we're not detecting his ship." Gatt's jaw clenched. "Not even debris?" The officer checked again. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Nothing, sir. No trace." The comms remained quiet. Not a single fragment. Not a single signal. Van Cleef was gone. On the Dakfadat flagship, no one spoke. The holo displays flickered, error signals scrolling in cascading glyphs. The weapon was gone. The High Leader remained frozen. His greatest weapon, his last chance at victory. Gone. Zaradar's voice was hushed, cautious. "High Leader." "Orders." Caligad didn't move. His fleet was still strong. Sort of. His armies were still numerous. Less than half remained, but still. His enemy had just thrown everything into that attack. And won. Now Caligad wasn't certain what came next. The Dakfadat fleet, once an unstoppable war machine, drifted, its ships broken, scattered, and bleeding fire into the void. The Eye of Nihilat was gone, and with it, the backbone of their strategic dominance. Caligad stood in his command chamber, watching the wreckage around him, his claws gripping the console hard enough to fracture the reinforced metal. This was not possible. They were the Dakfadat, the apex predators of the known galaxy. This war was supposed to be an extermination, a swift, merciless campaign. Instead, "High Leader," Zaradar's voice broke the silence, hesitant, controlled. "Our losses exceed projections. More than half the fleet is inoperable." Caligad's mandibles twitched, his golden eyes scanning the fragmented battle map before him. His forces were still superior in numbers, but their cohesion was crumbling. He refused to accept this. "Reroute auxiliary power. Signal all remaining vessels to regroup. We will continue." His voice was steady, even as his mind roared in frustration. Zaradar hesitated. "High Leader, our fleets are isolated. Human strike groups continue to harass our outer wings. We cannot reform a stable front." "Then we cut through them," Caligad snapped. "We continue toward the homeworld. There is no retreat." Zaradar's mandibles clicked softly, but he said nothing. He turned back to the battle display, relaying orders to the remaining warships. And then, something changed. A pulse swept through the battlefield. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a transmission. It was mass. A presence that hadn't been there before. Caligad's eyes snapped to the sensors. His talons went rigid. Something was moving. Kaligad's mind reeled, trying to untangle the unraveling threads of victory. The humans had not simply fought harder than expected. No. They had played for time. Every engagement, every retreat, every skirmish, none of it had been random. They had known they couldn't win a direct fight. Not with the eye of Nihilat in play, not against the full force of the Dak Fadat. So they made a choice. They sacrificed their best, their strongest. Van Cleef and his fighters had been sent not to survive, but to slow them down, to stall the fleet just long enough, to buy time for their true fleet to assemble, to hold the line so the real battle could begin. And when the moment came, he didn't hesitate. One pilot, one strike, one impossible moment. The eye was gone. The weapon that would have ended them in an instant was erased from existence. Kaligad's talons tightened, and now, because of it, his fleet was vulnerable, open, exposed. They had been baited, enormous warships. At first it was just a flicker on the periphery, an anomaly in the battle grid. Then, one by one, they appeared. Not the strike craft that had harassed them, not the smaller battle groups that had inflicted death by 1,000 cuts. No, this was something else. This was the true fleet of humanity. They emerged from the dark, from behind planetary shadows, from the far reaches beyond the asteroid belts, from regions the Dak Fadat had barely acknowledged. Their hulls gleamed under distant starlight, massive and slow-moving, not because of inefficiency, but because they had no need to rush. They had been preparing, watching, waiting. 100 warships, then 1,000, then more. It was impossible. They should not have been capable of fielding this. The humans were supposed to be outnumbered, primitive, weak. They told this to him. Yet here they were, a fleet 100 times the size of what they had initially faced, and they were not in a rush. They approached without urgency, closing the noose around the remnants of the Dak Fadat invasion force, their weapons silent, their formations flawless. And Kaligad felt it. Not frustration, not irritation, something deeper, something he had never known. Dread. Admiral Iwan Addy stood at the command deck of the UNS Kraken, the colossal battleship leading the human fleet into position. His arms were folded behind his back, his gaze locked on the battle ahead. The holo displays before him projected the battlefield in intricate detail. The Dak Fadat were finished. They just didn't know it yet. Lieutenant Mia Sofair turned from her station, her tone composed, professional. Admiral, all battle groups report ready. Outer wings have sealed their escape vectors. Addy gave a slow nod. Open a channel, the comm officer signaled. A moment later, the transmission went fleet-wide. Addy's voice carried across the battlefield, cold and certain. This is Admiral Iwan Addy, a human like the others you killed today, but no more. We will enter your ship, Kaligad. I'm not in a good mood, so I suggest you open the way and be grateful we're even talking. There was no response, at least, not at first. Then, Kaligad's transmission cut through, his voice strained, no longer carrying the same weight of certainty it once had. Your threats mean nothing, human. We are Dak Fadat. We do not surrender. Addy didn't even blink. I must confess, I was hoping you'd say that. He turned to his officers. Advance. The human fleet surged forward, its guns roaring to life in synchronized devastation. The Dak Fadat tried to counterattack, but it was not a battle anymore. It was an execution. Their formations collapsed instantly under the sheer magnitude of the human assault. Warships were torn apart, cruisers shattered, entire battle groups wiped from existence in coordinated strikes. Kaligad's bridge shook violently as explosions tore through his fleet, error messages scrolling in violent red across his tactical displays. Zaradar's voice was barely controlled. High Leader, we are surrounded. Our forces cannot hold this position. Then we break through, Kaligad snapped. But he knew the truth. There was nowhere to go. The war was lost. His mandibles clicked, his eyes burning with rage. Send everything we have. We die as warriors, not prey." Zaradar hesitated. For the first time, the fire in his warrior's eyes dimmed. Kaligad saw it, and he knew. He had already lost. The UNS Kraken and its battle group tore through the last defensive lines, cutting toward the Dakfadat flagship. Inside the bridge, Addy watched as the warlord's ship loomed before them, still defiant, still refusing to flee. "Target their engines. Cripple them." Sofair gave the order, and the Kraken's forward batteries ignited, sending a cascade of precision fire into the flagship's propulsion systems. The massive warship lurched, its thrusters sputtering, its forward movement dying. Addy exhaled slowly. "Prepare the boarding teams. We're ending this." Aboard the UNS Kraken, Admiral Iwan Addy stood motionless on the command deck, his gaze locked on the shattered remains of the enemy's war machine. The final prize. "Initiate boarding. Full assault teams deployed immediately." A pause. Addy's voice remained firm. "I'm going in." The boarding ships cut through the void, their thrusters burning bright as they approached the crippled Dakfadat flagship. Explosions still rippled across its fractured hull, debris floating like the remnants of a fallen empire. The once dominant warship, heart of the invasion, symbol of Dakfadat supremacy, now drifted like a gutted corpse, its engines severed, its defenses in ruin. Lieutenant Mia Sofair turned from her station, hesitation flickering in her dark eyes. "Admiral, frontline insertion isn't necessary. The enemy is disorganized. We can clear the ship without—" Addy cut her off with a single look. "They came to our world thinking we were prey. I want them to see, firsthand, how wrong they were." Sofair gave a sharp nod. "Yes, sir. Shoot anything that resists." The Kraken's assault teams deployed dozens of strike ships latching onto the warship's fractured hull. The breech doors hissed open, and human marines flooded inside, their weapons raised, their movements precise. This wasn't a battle anymore. The corridors shook as explosions rattled the ship's spine. Emergency sirens wailed, flickering red lights casting shadows over the panic spreading through the remaining Dakfadat warriors. High Leader Kaligad stood in the center of his command chamber, his golden eyes burning with defiance. His mandibles were drawn back, not in fear, but in rage. "We are not finished." His voice carried through the open communication channels, echoing across the fleet. "This is not the end. We are Dakfadat. We do not fall to lesser beings." His warlords listened. They gripped their weapons tighter, their exoskeletal armor flexing as their secondary hearts pounded with adrenaline. But there was hesitation, a tremor in the way they stood. They had seen the fleet torn apart. They had felt the eye of Nihilat collapse. They had watched wave after wave of their forces be erased in cold, calculated strikes. And now, the humans were inside their ship. "High Leader, the enemy has breached the inner decks." The voice came from Zaradar. His stance remained rigid, but there was something off in his posture, a crack in his conviction. Kaligad's claws curled into fists. "Then we fight." The first breach teams moved with deadly precision, cutting through the outer corridors, neutralizing scattered enemy forces with brutal efficiency. "Push forward, sweep every sector, no mercy." The voice belonged to Commander Julian Callender, leading the first wave of Marines. His battle rifle barked, dropping a Dakfadat warrior as it lunged from the shadows. They advanced deeper into the ship, cutting down resistance with ruthless coordination. Behind them, Admiral Addy entered the ship, his pace steady, his gaze sharp. He stepped over the corpse of a fallen Dakfadat soldier, barely sparing it a glance. The enemy was losing cohesion. They were falling back. The command chamber doors blasted inward, the reinforced metal torn apart by controlled charges. Smoke poured into the chamber as human marines rushed inside, weapons raised. Kaligad stood his ground. The High Leader of the Dakfadat did not flinch. His warlords surrounded him, their weapons locked, their breathing controlled. Admiral Addy stepped forward, his sidearm drawn but lowered. His boots echoed against the charred floor as he met Caligad's gaze. "This is over." Addy's voice was flat, cold. Caligad's mandibles twitched, but his posture remained unyielding. "Not yet." Caligad lunged, his blade a silver blur, cutting straight for Addy's throat. A gunshot rang out. Caligad staggered. A second shot tore through his chest, shattering exoskeletal plating. His breath hitched, his claws clutching at the wound. But he didn't fall. Not yet. His golden eyes locked onto Addy, his final words a whisper. "You think this is the end?" Addy raised his weapon one last time. "Yes." The final shot echoed through the chamber. Caligad fell. The open comms remained active. Across the remaining fleet, the transmission remained open. Dakfadat warriors heard their leader fall, heard the final breath leave his body. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, panic. Some warships powered down their weapons, surrendering without a fight. Others tried to flee, their formations unraveling in panic, vanishing into the abyss of space. Some made it, most did not. It was over. The few Dakfadat survivors knelt in restraints, their exoskeletal armor damaged, their weapons stripped from them. Among them, Zaradar sat motionless, his golden eyes still fixed on the floor, his mandibles unmoving. Admiral Addy stood before him. "Why Earth?" His voice was measured, controlled. For a moment, Zaradar said nothing. Then, a single breath, a quiet, bitter laugh. "We were sent here." Addy's gaze darkened. "By who?" Zaradar's gaze lifted, calm now, resigned. "Informants within the Council. They knew of your world, your resources, your potential." Addy took a step forward, his voice colder. "Who are they?" Zaradar let out a dry, rattling sound, half a chuckle, half something else. "I don't know." Addy didn't back down. "Lies." "It's not." Zaradar met his gaze, unwavering. "I never spoke to them, never saw them. Only Caligad knew their identities." Silence. Addy's grip tightened. "Why?" Zaradar's mandibles twitched, his voice almost amused. "Because they fear you." Addy didn't react, didn't blink. "Dissect the ship, tear it apart. We find everything we can." He turned, stepping away from the prisoners, his voice low and cold as steel as he addressed his second-in-command. "Let them get some rest. Because when we move again," a pause, "we're hunting traitors." Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and one last thing. Every great soldier knows that to survive and become a hero, taking care of yourself is key. So before you go, check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's important. And I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.